Greetings, friends and folks. Now that we have shown you a couple of sewing projects, it is time to take a closer look at the Brother FS60X, the sewing machine that I have been working with over the last few project videos, which also, by the way, reminds me of my very first sewing machine, which is the Brother JA1400. I've acquired this sewing machine at the beginning of the year. I love it, and I have been using it ever since. If you would know, I do own a Brother FR20 sewing machine, which I also love to death. I made garments with it, bags, and even quilts, if you will. If you haven't seen the unboxing video for the Brother FS60X, go and check out the link below and come back to this video to get to know more about the Brother FS60X. Also, in this video, I will be showing you on how to easily thread this machine, and I will show you how the semi-automatic needle threader works. So without further ado, let's take a closer look at the Brother FS60X, the extra tough computerized sewing machine. So first, let's take a look at the basic parts of the Brother FS60X. First, you have the vertical spool pin. You want to make sure that you are using a stack thread or a stack spool of thread on this sewing machine because it has this vertical spool pin. If you don't have a stack thread in your stash, you can actually get one of those extra horizontal spool pin, and you can actually insert it right over here. There is a slot here that you can actually use a spare spool pin. You can either put a vertical spool pin here or a horizontal spool pin. Next, you have the bobbin winder, the bobbin winder shaft, and the bobbin winder sensor. So this is where you put your bobbin and wind it, and once the bobbin is full, the sensor will detect and it will make the machine stop winding the bobbin automatically. So if you're going to take a closer look at the bobbin winder shaft, there is a ridge there. There is like kind of a metal bit right there. You want to make sure that you match that shaft or that metal thing bit onto the slot on your bobbin, which I'm going to show you later on. And this is to ensure that your bobbin will be wound perfectly and smoothly. So next, over here we have the thread guide and the pre-tension disc. So the thread guide is the first or the starting point of your guide every time you're going to thread your machine. And if you're going to wind your bobbins, you want to make sure that you pass the thread under the thread guide and around the pre-tension disc front to back. So it's going to move like in this motion. So the thread will go under and you will pass it from the front to the back, wrapping it around the pre-tension disc. So right on the side of your machine is your hand wheel. A lot of people don't know that you can actually use the hand wheel whenever you are doing manual stitches, especially if you're doing a pivoting stitch on any of your projects. It's actually a great idea to use the hand wheel so that you gain a lot of control over on what you're sewing. Of course, on the side you have the on and off button and the ports for the power cable and the port for the foot pedal. Over here is the vent. This will help your machine cool down every time you are sewing. And then over here we have the panel. The panel has an LCD screen and some buttons. So the buttons are actually used to either move your needle left and right, and of course to shorten or lengthen your stitches. And over here, of course, you have the other buttons for the stitch selection. And then below the panel, you have the stitch selection panel. So this machine has 60 built-in stitches. Majority of the stitches are utilitarian in nature, while the rest are for decorative purposes. So pretty much you'll have every stitches that you're going to need on this machine. So next we have the speed control slider over here. This is very helpful, especially when you want to gain control of your sewing speed. I'm not a big fan of sewing very fast, so I don't usually put it to the maximum. I always put it to the moderate speed so that I gain control of my stitching. And then you have the needle up and down button. One press and it will raise the needle, so this is very helpful, especially if you're ending a stitch or a seam, so that you don't have to use the hand wheel to raise the needle. You can also use this whenever you're starting sewing. So it's always a good idea to lower your needle down before starting a seam or a stitch. And you have the backstitch button. So always when you're starting to stitch, always do at least 2 back stitches before sewing a straight seam or whatever you're sewing. And then of course you have the start and stop button. So every time you don't want to use the foot pedal when sewing, you can actually leave that unplugged and you can just operate the machine using the start and stop button. Over here is the tension dial. So here we have the throat plate. The throat plate is one of the integral part of the sewing machine because this is where all the sewing happens. On the throat plate, you'll find your bobbin case. The bobbin case is where you store your bobbin, and the Brother FS60X, this machine has a drop-in bobbin mechanism. And then here, you'll have your presser foot attached to the shank. Underneath the presser foot, you'll have your feed dogs. The feed dogs are the metal parts that helps your fabric move through as you're sewing. You'll see your needle and the needle bar. And one of the best things about this machine is it has a semi-automatic needle threader. I'll be showing that later on how to work this. This is very important. This will make your sewing life very easy. And then of course you have the shank that holds everything together. And lastly, the buttonhole lever. This will help you in determining the length of your button whenever you're trying to make buttonhole stitches. Winding the bobbin on this machine is very easy. First, pull up the spool pin as far as possible and put a spool of thread on this. Make sure that the thread unwinds from back to front, which is from right to left. Then pass the thread under the thread guide and around the pretension disc front to back. Pass the thread through the hole on the bobbin, making sure that the notch fits the projection. Set the bobbin on the bobbin winder shaft and then slide the shaft to the right. While holding the end of the thread, start the machine to wind the thread around the bobbin a few times. Then stop the machine and trim the excess thread. When the bobbin seems full and begins spinning slowly, stop the machine. Cut the thread, slide the bobbin winder shaft to the left and remove the bobbin. Now put the bobbin in the bobbin case, holding the end of the thread. Push the bobbin down with your finger and then pass the thread through the slit. To thread the machine, pass the thread under the thread guide. Then pass the thread through the thread channel by following the numbered path printed on the machine. Making sure that the thread passes and hooks on the thread take-up lever. Slide the thread behind the needle bar thread guide. Using the semi-automatic needle threader. While lowering the needle threader lever fully, hook the thread onto the guide, then push the needle threader lever until it stops. Pass the thread in front of the needle. Make sure that the thread is under the hook that has come through the eye of the needle and the hook catches the thread. Return the needle threader lever to the front slowly and then release the lever slowly. Pull the loop off the thread and pass the end of the thread under the presser foot to the back. There are a couple of things you should consider if you are looking to acquire a new sewing machine. And these types of videos are a great resource, especially if you have no clue yet as to what suits your needs best. Decide on how do you want to use the machine for. Is it only for mending and basic sewing? Are you planning to make your own wearable clothes? Will you be doing some heavy sewing like making bags or leather work? These are some of the things to consider when getting a new machine. Do you want to have a mechanical or a computerized one? Do not hesitate to ask anyone about these things. You can visit a reputable dealer and ask them all the questions you have. Normally, dealers, if they are knowledgeable enough to know about their machines, will tell you all the information about a specific product before selling it to you. And some will just directly sell it to you even without asking for your requirements. So that's one thing you should think about. If by chance you already have this machine and have questions on how things work, I feel like the best idea is to always refer to your sewing manual, as it answers most of the beginner questions. If you are eyeing a specific Brother machine and still don't know the specifications, you can simply go to www.brother.ae and you will find all the information you're looking for. On a personal note, the Brother FS60X fulfills my requirements in terms of my sewing process and needs. I pretty much sew anything. I have sewn vinyl on this machine and even leather, and polyester foam if you will. It boasts a lot of features with an incredible price tag. The Brother FS60X is relatively light compared to other sewing machines, which makes it effortless to transport or carry. The most wonderful feature for me in this machine would be the semi-automatic needle threader, which makes my sewing process quicker. Also, the machine comes with a couple of basic accessories, enough to get you going with your sewing projects, whether it be a garment or something else. The start and stop button helps whenever I feel lazy stepping on the foot pedal, and of course it has a lot of built-in stitches, which is enough for all of my sewing projects. So in conclusion, this machine is fitting as an entry-level or mid-level sewing machine. In my most unbiased opinion, this machine can do a lot for you. Though if you are in a position of investing on a higher-end model, you may do so, but trust me, you can make an entire wardrobe out of this. So thank you very much for joining me. This is Julius. Follow me on Instagram at SewIt'sYourStyle, or subscribe to my YouTube channel if you don't mind. I'll have more projects coming soon, but until then, happy sewing.